All right. Learn something new every day.
Okay. All right.
All right. So welcome to our webinar, How to Prepare for a Successful Career in Medical Sales, a Physician's Insight. We're excited to be joining the Lobby Medical Sales Network and Kendi Elmore and his group. And we love what he's building at the Lobby and appreciate the opportunity to share what Dr. Mangone and I have created with Sales that Heal with his network. So this is going to be the first in a three-part series where we're going to talk about some of the principles in our audio masterclass entitled Sales that Heal, a physician's guide to impactful medtech sales. In tonight's webinar, we're going to speak a lot about preparation and the importance of preparation. But before we get too deep into the weeds, Dr. Mangone, why don't you first introduce yourself and then talk to us a little bit about the inspiration, the motivation, what led you to create, what was the motivation behind creating Sales that Heal?
Well, thanks, Mike. And thanks, Kendi. Appreciate the opportunity to be associated with your network. And we hope this can be helpful for those out there who are going into this or are already into this career path. And that's something that would be beneficial for all of us, including patients. So, so my name is Pete Mangone. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I'm up in Pittsburgh now. I was in Asheville, North Carolina for 25 years before I recently shifted coming up on a year ago soon to be more of in a teaching environment. I had been in a private practice realm for a long time. And I had excellent relationships with my reps and my medical device people throughout my career. And part of the reason I think that is the case is because in my background, I always had a little bit of both sides of the equation. So growing up, my dad was a pharmaceutical sales person. And so when I was in high school and old enough to know enough to remember and he would oftentimes come home and, talk to my mom about the day and how it had gone at the dinner table. And I would hear the various stories about people who did well, people who didn't do well, what was going on with the politics of everything. And then even as I became more interested in medicine and wanting to be a physician, I was the only one in my family. There was nobody else that's ever been a physician. My dad would sometimes practice his presentations or techniques on myself, basically. He would say, okay, here, Pete, you stay there. You're the doctor, so when I was in med school and things like that, and I would kind of listen to what he was going to say, or he would describe for me the technique that he would use for a certain doctor with a certain drug that had just come out. And I would ask him questions. I was interested in what do you do for a living? How do you learn this? What happens? What happens when you get a doctor who doesn't want to talk to you or this or that or the other? And I would ask him, questions about that. So when I arrived into practice and I started, seeing people, so I'd gone through residency and I always had a soft spot, if you will, for people who are in the medical device field, because I didn't get a lot of pharmaceutical reps in my particular vein of interest as an orthopedic surgeon, but certainly I would, have a lot of device reps. And, sometimes I saw them get abused with requests for food and other things. And this was back before AdvaMed and, travel and trips and things of that nature. And I always didn't feel right with me. But then I get into practice and I, start having people who are in my operating room and helping me take care of my patients. And every time they would come talk to me in the office or be talking to me in the OR, I was kind of secretly, if you will, grading them based upon what I knew from my dad. I would just be like, oh yeah, that was really good. Okay, that person, that's smart. That's a good idea. Or, oh, that's not so good. That's probably not what I was looking for. And I would try in many cases to kind of either hint them toward the right answer, or I would even tell them, hey, I may not be the right person for you, but I would go talk to Dr. So-and-so. I think this might be a better person for this product because of X, Y, Z. I would try to help them along with their, task, if you will. So as the years went on, I would see more people, and I would talk to their managers if I felt like they had potential, and I'd say, hey, you need to work on this person. So a lot of time, all throughout my career, the reps would say, oh, that's great, Dr. You got to write all this down. You got to, these are great tips. These are great tricks, or this is good information. I wish I'd have known that when I started. You got to write this down. So I've always had this idea for the last 10 to 15 years of, I need to do this book. And fortunately ran into Mike here, and we were talking about it, and he said, hey, why don't we do a masterclass audio book type of product, because the young people nowadays listen more than they read, and they can listen to it in the car, and they can listen to it over and over again. And it really resonated. So we sat down and put this together because it was something that a lot of my reps had reached out over the years and asked me to rehash with them old tips, old information I had gone over with them in the past, as well as the managers who used to say to me, boy, I wish, all my reps, all the people had an opportunity to spend more time with you in the OR, because the information I would sit down and debrief with them was always very helpful, and they gave me feedback. It was helpful for their career. So hopefully, the goal of this is to hopefully provide the next generation and some of the people in the current generation some of that information. And just like I'm helping in a teaching role now in my primary career as an orthopedic surgeon, to me, this is another extension of teaching that helps bring quality to the patient.
Yeah, it's super well said. Knowing and understanding who your customer is probably, one of the first things a young sales rep should do when they get their territory organized. Like, who am I calling on? Really trying to understand and show some empathy to what your prospect goes through on a day-to-day basis. So you talk about the physician's insight. What makes that unique? I mean, there are a lot of places that young professionals can go to learn how to sell. Probably not very many places where a physician is going to give them really keen insight on what to do, what not to do. Why do you think that's important?
Well, I think one of the things that's most difficult for anybody who's early on in any career, sales being one of them, is that a lot of times people will say, again, a statement like, well, you should know your customer first. But part of the issue is, well, where do I even start? So you can say, well, here's the orthopedic surgeon. Well, how do I find out about that, right? It's tough. It's tough to go read a book. There's no book out there that says this is what an orthopedic surgeon takes care of fractures and things like that. But there's a dictionary definition of it. But until you've really had an opportunity to understand, there's a difference between knowing sort of a definition of who your customer is and understanding who your customer is, that I think is the difference. And in my fellowship, I had the opportunity to work with a great surgeon by the name of Jim Samarco out of Cincinnati, who subsequently retired. But he was a big Stephen Covey fan, and his statement was always, Stephen Covey's, which was seek to understand before being understood. And really getting a grasp as to, when we say who's your customer, it's not just knowing the definition of your customer. It's understanding your customer. And that really goes to a relationship. You have to build a relationship with that person, and you have to establish a relationship with that person before you can really understand who they are and how you can work with them. If you just come in with the same, for instance, if you just say, okay, an orthopedic surgeon is somebody who fixes bones and takes care of bones, and everybody is that generic definition, then you will try to apply a single definition of understanding to everybody. And in reality, understanding your customer comes down to understanding the individual and the surgeon. And then subsequently, why is that important? Well, the main reason it's important is because that's going to drive the efficiency and the techniques and the information that you're going to present to that person, because everybody's going to react a little bit differently. And probably I learned that best, not so much through sales as I did with, a combination of patient care and my children, right? And so
Nice.
your children, you kind of expect them to all be either mini me's or mini your spouse, right? And the reality is they're a blend, and some are different and what motivated me as an individual growing up was not what necessarily motivated my children. And so it was I had to learn to be a better parent by learning how to understand or better understand my children, and vice versa, the same with patients. I had to learn to be a great listener of my patients, to really try to understand what are they asking me for. For some people, they're asking me for permission to have surgery. Maybe they're reluctant. They've had a bad experience. Somebody in their family had a bad experience. Right. They're looking for that. Other patients are looking for safety. Other patients are looking for a way not to have surgery. They want somebody to tell them. And some people are just there for information gathering purposes. Right. But if I don't understand why they're there, then it's no different than a mechanic in a car who you bring the car in and you want the air conditioning fixed, and they fix the fuel pump, right? You could be the best fuel pump fixer in the world, but if you've misread the request from the person who's your customer, then they're going to leave and be unhappy with that result, despite the fact that it was technically done well, right?
Right.
And so I think the surgeon insight is something that's difficult to get, because many surgeons, number one, won't give it to you. You have fairly limited time in the environment that you're in. There's a lot of pressure, certainly, I'm sure, toward quotas and getting sales and getting up off the ground. So there's sometimes a tendency to skip the understanding step in order to try to get sales up and running quickly. And with that, you miss out on the information that can help you not only be more effective in your job to help take care of people. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there are quotas and things that exist, but ultimately your job is helping to take care of people. But the other thing is efficiency, right? If you can identify the correct message for the right customer, then you don't spend a lot of time on other things that don't end up bringing you value. And so, a great example, again, I was talking to some people about testing. When you read a book chapter, you're going to have a test, right? You don't try to memorize the entire book chapter, right? While you're in the middle of studying, you're identifying, oh yeah, this was an important point. The professor said to pay attention to this, right? So I need to make sure that I pay attention to this, because there's probably going to be a question on the test on this particular topic, because they spent a day on it in the lecture hall. And so you identify where to put your time, right? Where to put your time and effort, because that's valuable for you as a sales device rep. You only have so many calls you can make in a day, you can only be in one place at one time. So by understanding your customer and having a better understanding of the surgeon, you can then be more efficient with your time, which results in a better, better results from the time you spend with each individual surgeon.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sales is going to occur on your customer's timetable, not yours.
Yes.
Right. It's not going to happen just because you push. You have to build a relationship. And we both know medical sales is evolving, and we're going to talk about that probably in our next webinar. And we certainly get into it extensively in the series of how it's shifted from a physician-only sale to a more complex relationship sale with multiple stakeholders. But it starts with the physician, right? It starts with the physician who is going to be deciding whether or not this is a solution that I want to consider for my patients. And so if you're a rep and you're getting started and you just landed in your territory and you're evaluating your prospects, talk about what is a typical day in the life of a physician. And I guess in your case, more specifically, what's the day in the life of an orthopedic surgeon? And why is that important for a rep to understand all the things that you have, that you're juggling to manage your day, your week, your practice, your patients, your business, and all the above. Talk a little bit about that, Dr. Mangone.
Yeah. So let's just, just for example's sake, we'll take somebody mid-career we're not, somebody obviously at the beginning of their career may have a little bit more time, things like that. But let's just talk about the mid-career private practice, surgeon that's out there. So typically that person is going to be in clinic 2 to 2.5 days a week, and they're going to be in the OR 2 to 2.5 days a week, somewhere in that realm. So what does clinic mean? Well, for most people, now certainly there are some doctors who have, more specific clinic schedules that maybe, they start very early and go till early afternoon and they're done. But in general, that's going to be somewhere between 8 to 5, 8 to 4, 8 to 5, somewhere in that realm, right? During that time, they are going to have a full schedule, right? They're going to be seeing at least for most busy orthopedic surgeons, they're going to be seeing anywhere from, 20 to 25 patients in a morning, maybe 15 to 25, let's say, if that, and probably 20 to 25 in the afternoon. So somewhere between 40 and 50 patients. They are usually going to be a little bit behind. Not everybody is, but a little bit behind because, these topics that come up, somebody has a complication, somebody has this, there's different things that occur.
Yeah.
And because of that, those, patients are going to need extra time. And then, hopefully they're trying to get all their documentation done, while they're in clinic. But the reality is that many people are not able to complete all their documentation at the time they're in the middle of their clinic, because they're not only are they seeing patients, but they're answering phone calls from patients at the same time. They are, they're, trying to arrange for a case. Somebody comes in with a new injury. They've got to figure out their staff is coming to them. There's somebody at the front desk who hasn't paid their copay, and you have to find out, is that patient allowed to be seen? Things like that. And so
pre-authorization, wrestling with insurance.
They're dealing with all these sorts of things. Rarely did I take a formal lunch in my private practice. If I had any sort of lunch, it was maybe, 15 minutes to kind of, settle. But then during that 15 minutes, I was doing something, right? Talking to my staff, calling the OR, checking on something else in many cases. So then they get done their clinic. Now they have to make sure their documentation's done. That could be, they could do that right afterward. They might do that evening. Part of the reason they may do that evening is they may have other tasks they need to do, whether it be family related issues, get home for dinner, go to a son or a daughter's ball game. The same thing, they may have a committee meeting at the hospital, or they may have a meeting for their practice, right? If they're in private practice, there's potentially a board meeting, or they have to go cover a football game for a high school if they're a sports medicine related doctor. And that may be, they may have multiple games a week that they have to cover, so they may be going to a football game on Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night if they're a sports medicine person. So basically,
wait, are you saying doctors have lives too?
And so, well, the football game they're going to is covering the football game for
right.
This. That's what I'm saying, is that's
work.
their job. That's work. Yeah, they're out there working and being there as in many cases a volunteer. And I mean, I don't want to make it sound like doctors' lives are terrible. Certainly we have a wonderful life, and there's truck drivers and UPS drivers and nurses and other people in the healthcare provision and medical device reps who are busy and working hard. But certainly in your realm as a medical device rep, you have to understand what is the day in the life of a surgeon. And so typically if you're in clinic, that's what's happening. If you're in the OR, you're going to go to the operating room at 7:30, you're probably going to be there 7:15, 7 o'clock to 7:15. You're going to go to the OR. And in many cases, we don't have a lot of time in between surgeries. Sometimes you do. If you only have one room, you've got a little bit of time for turnover. But typically in that time frame, when the case gets done, you've got to dictate the case, go talk to the family, go get the next patient set up, sign the leg, sign the arm, whatever surgery you're going to do, make sure all the paperwork's finished, get the room set up. If you've got a physician assistant, sometimes that can help. But obviously, if it's somebody who doesn't have a physician assistant at that point in their career, they're going to be getting the next patient set up, and then they have the case to do, and it, goes over again. And they may have 4, they may have 6, they may have 8 or 12 cases. And so understanding what was happening in that person's realm from a surgery standpoint a spine surgeon may have a longer case. They may have a 3 or 4 hour case. Well, probably at the end of 3 or 4 hours, when you've done that, the last thing you're going to do is probably sit down and talk to a device rep for 20 minutes about their product.
Yep.
And, the other thing is, the question then becomes, well, how effective can you be in that time corridor, right? Because how focused is the surgeon on you and your message if they're worried about what's going on for the next case, right?
Yeah, so with cognitive overload at that point, right?
Correct, right. Cognitive and just task overload, right?
Yeah.
And so they've only got so much time to do things. So understanding that, and then being able to tailor and find out, okay, when are the busy days, not busy days? What, how does this surgeon like to be approached? Does this surgeon, would they be better meeting in the morning, in the afternoon? Finding, again, that's the relationship aspect, right? It's no different than any other relationship that you develop in life. If you want to be friends with somebody and you call them in the middle of their workday all the time, and that's not when they like to be approached, you probably won't develop a very strong relationship with them, right? But if you know that, hey, Saturday mornings from 8 to 10 is the time I have time, I can go, I can play golf with that person, I can do whatever I'm going to do in a relaxing standpoint, then you can develop that relationship and understand it. So I think getting that insight of, I think sometimes we see, television shows and what they kind of glorify medicine. I mean, I've heard a lot about The Pit. I haven't seen it. But I mean, other shows there, it's as realistic as it is, it's still not what most people do, right? Most people aren't in the emergency room taking care of patients in the emergency room. They do a fantastic job and they work really hard, and it's a very difficult endeavor. But most people are out in the private practice or outpatient realm,
right,
taking care of patients. And the reality is, in the modern day of medicine, that is a go business, right? It is, and it's not necessarily, because people are trying to generate revenue just for the purpose of generating revenue. The reality was, I would have liked to have seen less patients in my private practice, but there was just demand, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who need care. There's a limited number of physicians who can provide it. And so there's just a lot of demand. And so with that being the case, when somebody breaks their hip or somebody breaks their ankle or somebody breaks their arm, somebody has to be there to take care of it. And that doesn't always happen on a schedule, and it can be disruptive. So, but knowing that background and at least getting a sense, and like I said, that's a generic overview, but you have to find out who you're calling on, right?
Right.
Who are you calling on to better understand that person individually, because that will again help you to better identify, when is the best time to approach that doctor, so that you get their attention, right? And how many times have we had a spouse or a friend or anybody tell us something and we just don't remember? And part of the reason we don't remember is because we weren't, paying attention because we had other things on our mind.
Right.
And so finding that space and time to allow that surgeon to be focused is critical. Yeah,
there's going to be times to approach and times to absolutely not approach. You provided some really useful advice in Sales That Heal, which is just ask me. Just ask me. How do I like to be communicated with? When is a proper and appropriate time? I know you're busy. I appreciate you taking just a few minutes to speak with me now. What would you like to do? How would you like me to communicate with you? And when it would be a good time for us to just take 5 minutes, have a quick cup of coffee, just to get to know each other. So if I'm a medical sales rep, because everything you just described can be very intimidating to a young medical sales rep. Like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to get to meet Dr. Mangone. How's this possible? If I'm a new rep, I just landed in Pittsburgh, I've got this new widget. How would you like a rep to sort of approach you for the first time? It's somebody you don't know.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, obviously there is some protocol from a standpoint of if you don't know anything at all, certainly going through the office and approaching that way can be helpful, just to as an introductory meeting. And I've had, since I've been at Pittsburgh, that's what, I've had multiple reps contact me through my office, say, hey, my secretary or administrative person's come and said, this person asked if they could have some time to talk with you and better understand, or introduce their role and how and find out how they can be helpful to you.
Right.
And so we've had those introductory meetings. The other thing is, to lean on your team, lean on your
management team,
your manager, lean on your fellow reps, even competitors. In many cases, the realm of orthopedic medical device rep sales is small.
Mm-hmm.
The person who's working for company B today was working for company A 5 years ago and was working for company C 7 years before that. So they oftentimes may know the doctor from a different role, and sometimes can provide that introduction. And I'm in the OR with somebody. Hey, do you mind if Matt gives you a call, or Joe gives you a call, or I know you like. For me, I like to text, works better for me than email. Hey, do you mind if there's a rep that wants to talk to you about something? Obviously, if it's a direct competitor, they don't sometimes want you to do that. But in many cases, it's not the direct competition. You have somebody who's
complimentary.
Yes, correct. Complimentary and knows somebody through the contacts. I'm not a big fan of people just showing up to the operating room or showing up to my office out of the blue and saying, hey, I'm here. Can I be seen?
That's stalking you in the parking lot. Not a good idea.
Yeah. I just don't think that works for me. Now, for other people, maybe that's how they want to be approached. I don't know. But for me, that's not the way that works best. Now, certainly, again, sometimes I might be in between cases and I'm in the room, I'm in a surgeon's lounge, or I'm in the hallway, and somebody approaches me and says, hey, Dr. Mangone, I'm new to town, or I understand you're new to town. I was wondering, is there a time I can set up when I can meet with you? Right. Because I'm the rep with X company. And I would say, yeah, great. You know what? Do me a favor. Here's my administrator's number. Give her a call. Here's my, administrative assistant's number. Give her a call and have her set up a time for us to meet sometime in the next couple of months. On Mondays work best for me. Right. And so I can kind of clue them in. And they're not trying to sell me anything. They're not trying to, they just are identifying themselves. And you have to read the room a little bit on that. Obviously, if the person's just come out of a complicated case and they're exhausted, or they've got 5 people around them and they're trying to give directions, that's not the time to approach it. But at the same time, if there's kind of a lull, you can certainly step in and do that. And I do think that as long as you're appropriate, right? It's like meeting anybody.
Sure.
And the reality is, despite how grandiose the person's name is or not, the reality is we all, put our pants on the same way or put our socks on the same way. We're all people. Right. So I think, if you treat somebody with courtesy, now, if they're not going to treat you with courtesy back, maybe there's a message there, right? Maybe that's not somebody you want to have a relationship with. Maybe that's not. Now, how important is that person to your business? I don't know. You have to make that assessment, whether it's worth. But again, like any relationship, if you have a relationship where one side is not kind and not receptive, right? Is that a relationship you want to, consistently pursue? Maybe, okay, well, somebody has a bad day, you try again, but after 2 or 3 times, if that person is just not going to be a receptive person, then the message may be, okay, I need to take my time and energy and devote it into a different direction where I'm going to have a better relationship or find a better relationship with this person. Or you have to reach somewhere else and do some digging and find out, hey, is there somebody in my company or somebody that I can work with that knows this person has a relationship and therefore can vouch for me, right? It gives me a little bit of credibility, so that when I do approach that person, they don't just scoff at me and send me off. But I think that's important too. you have to be able to identify, when am I just beating my head against a brick wall? And is this a worthwhile relationship to continue to pursue? How important is it? Because maybe that's not a fruitful way to go.
Yeah, right. For sure. So as we were thinking about breaking down, understanding your customer, we created a bit of a matrix, based upon career stage, based upon practice type, and even based upon, might be like a Rubik's Cube, and based upon where did you train and what is your sort of product philosophy. All those things are intermeshed. Talk a little bit about maybe using that as a framework for creating your own database, if you will, as a rep for your customer prospects.
Right. Yeah. And this really goes to the heart of knowing your customer, right? It's about, studying your customer and not just their CV or their profile on the website, but, we really break it down to it's as big as a Rubik's Cube, if not bigger, but it's something that goes to really, I think, one, education and training, right? Understanding where did that person come from? Yeah. What implants or devices did they use most frequently, right? And you can find that information out. Call the rep from, Texas
training program,
or Alabama or wherever. Hey, what's the situation with this person? What's the search? What's happening with this surgeon? What did they use most frequently? Who were their mentors? Because they're going to probably follow their mentors initially with their implant choices and things like, okay, how tight are they? Are they, just get a little bit of information on that, right? 2, what stage in career are they in? So are they early, right into practice? Are they mid-level, mid-career? And I call it, early mid, mid, and late mid, or are they kind of at the very tail end of their career? What's their thought pattern? Are they an innovator? Are they an early adopter? Are they, always the follower? Right.
Yeah, where are they on that bell curve?
Right. And that's not something you may glean from talking to somebody else. You're going to have to talk to the surgeon, the person, he or she, to, ask some probing questions. And you don't necessarily, you don't ask the question, are you an innovator or not? Because people, but you can certainly ask questions that you can glean that information from, in terms of, you may know what some of the newer ideas are out there. Hey, doctor, do you use these products? Tell me a little bit about how you approach ankle fractures. Oh, I've used Synthes for the last 25 years. Okay, well, and Synthes has good products, right? But at the same time, that may be where you're using the new products, old product, whatever the case, you can kind of find out from your information what products. I'm using Stryker, Enovis, in my realm, it's foot and ankle, Paragon, Smith and Nephew, whatever the case might be, right? There's no one thing, but you can find out a little bit about what product. Are they using the products from 20 years ago? Or are they using products from, the last 2 or 3 years? Not that necessarily I want to say that one's better than the other. It's just you can glean information about where that person is on the innovator curve, right? With that information, right? What type of practice are they in? Are they private practitioner? Are they employed? Are they a 1099 type person that's employed? Are they a W-2? If
university, academic?
Yeah, university. Are they an academic practice? Or are they, in a private practice employed model? And then with that, if let's say they're, in a private practice model, do they own a surgery center? Do they operate at a surgery center? And then even knowing, is it an independent surgery center or is it a hospital outpatient orthopedic, or a hospital outpatient surgery center? Because those two are reimbursed differently. So how you approach somebody would be different in terms of what type of outpatient surgery center. So kind of putting all these, pieces in whether you have a checklist, whatever the case might be, but you just want to kind of outline all of this, and that creates, right? It's sort of like a paint by numbers. When you get the paint by numbers, first you fill in, number 1, number 2, number 3, and you paint by numbers. And then when you get done, you have a picture, right? And you see what the picture shows, right? And so adding each of these little elements in, each one has a little bit of a different color to them that is like that paint by numbers, so that when you get done collecting this information, you now have a picture of who is my customer,
right?
And a early career surgeon who came from a program that was very traditional, right? Who is an employed physician in a large academic center is probably not going to be probably not going to be in a position to be as innovative, or they might not be as somebody who is a private practitioner in a hospital, in an independent surgery center setting, who trained with either in their fellowship or residency in a program that was more progressive in terms of, implants or techniques or things like that, was on the cutting edge of techniques, and is in kind of their mid-career, maybe, their 5 to 15 year career. That's going to be a different person that is going to respond differently to the message that you have. And so, creating that paint by numbers picture of who they are is really, we talk a lot about that in the book, and the masterclass, in terms of getting to know that and the techniques to get to know that, because that's key, once again, not only toward being successful with your sales and your ultimate quota, but also being efficient with your time. Right. And bringing the right message to the right customer. Because if I'm an employed surgeon that, I don't want to say nobody cares about numbers or dollar cents or that, but let's say you're an employed surgeon early on in your career, and there's no gain share component to your contract, and it's in a big academic or a big healthcare system, not just academic, but a healthcare system that maybe you have very little power in. Mm-hmm. The message, this will save money for the system, may not resonate as well as if you've got a mid-level, private practitioner in a outpatient surgery center setting, whose group participates in a bundle type payment model with a private insurer. Right now, all of a sudden, implant cost makes a big difference, right, in terms of how they're thinking. So you can then shape your message appropriately to the person that you're presenting to.
Yeah, not only shape your message, and we're going to talk about this in part 2 of our webinar series, and we'll get into this when we talk about the sales process, but going through that exercise of creating, let's call it a bio, if you will, of your prospect, will also allow you to better inform you to create the right questions to ask when you kick off the sales process. Not necessarily frame your message just yet, but frame the questions you want to ask so that you can better understand, once you start engaging your prospect in the sales process, what their challenges are, what their problems are. You've got an idea already, and you can use that data that you've collected through that research process to start framing out those questions.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. Like I said, we'll talk about that more. We do talk about it more in the chapters that we'll discuss in the next webinar, but also in the book itself and the masterclass talk about that fact of developing that relationship. I think that is absolutely key. I think the one thing that I see that is probably the biggest, if you will, error in the early career device rep is they want to tell me their message.
Right.
They want to tell me their story right away. Right. And what they, and they don't really have that understanding of, number one, what is my story? And not because I need to tell you my story. I don't need to tell you my story.
Right.
But if you want to find a message that's going to resonate with me and help me take care of my patients better, then you have to understand me and what my practice is and what's my circle of influence, all those sorts of things, to making that decision. And then once you have a better understanding of that, then, like you said, setting up the pathway with questions, finding out where you can be of value, because that's really where the sales occur, right? Unless you have a product that nobody else has, right? What you're selling is value, right? What value do you bring to me as this device rep? And how does that help my patients? Because ultimately, that's what I'm interested in.
Right.
I know there's money and this and that and the other and dollars and cents and things and say, but how does that help my patient? Right. In some instances, it may be a dollar value. Hey, that means my patient can go to a surgery center and they can pay less for their surgery, which allows them to have, more income for themselves rather than a large hospital bill. Right. In other cases, it may be that this product brings a better healing potential. And even though it may cost a little bit more, the patient has a higher chance of healing with that scenario, has a lower chance of additional surgeries, and therefore that's of value.
Right.
So bringing that value and understanding where does that value exist. And that's really, like you said, first step is understanding who the surgeon is. Second step is then preparing the questions to find out where you can bring value. And the third step, as we'll go over, is identifying what is in your portfolio that you can bring to the attention to the surgeon that can meet the value that they're looking for.
That's right. Yeah. You don't know what problems your customers are having until you ask. So as part of preparing and building that relationship, you're earning the right to begin to ask those questions. So, well, I don't know if we have any questions in the chat. I don't see any. And so
one of the things I wanted to talk about that I wanted to make sure that people understand is the title is, I think that one of the things that, we took a lot of different titles and looked around to try to see what would work best. Would it be, should we just call this a surgeon's guide to medical sales? Should we, what should we call this? And we kind of settled on the sales that heal. And the reason that resonated with me was because I think one of the unfortunate aspects of the current era of medicine is that I think there's been a lot of harsh words and a lot of negativity that's been brought to the forefront about medical device reps, and that somehow medical device reps are bad. Especially big health systems, sometimes there's an antagonistic relationship between,
they're unnecessary. Why are they even here?
Right. Well, and it's sort of like the same thing as, countries fight between each other, right? The individual citizens would get along, but the governments don't, right? And so the same thing, sometimes the bigger entities that are in control of bigger health systems, they view the implant companies as in an antagonistic method because, of course, it's an overhead expense for them or whatever the case might be. And I think obviously in any situation, there's a little bit of truth on both sides of the equation. So, both bring valuable information, but in our day-to-day lives as surgeons, and that we, and not just surgeons, but the people in the operating room rely heavily on medical device reps to be present and be excellent. And if they're not, in many cases, and I'm not going to say the patient suffers because the medical device rep isn't good, but it certainly creates more difficulty in creating a healthy relationship in the operating room, a comfortable environment, and provides us with everything we need to care for that patient in an expedient and efficient fashion. And so better the rep is, and that's part of the reason I educated my reps, throughout my career, because I saw them as a key element of my team, right? I don't necessarily, they're not my employees, but they're still, it's just like the OR staff, we're not employees of me, but they're my team, and they're the team that's around me. And without a great team, I can't have great results, right? Certainly I'm the head of the ship, and I've got to have some competency and that, but I've got to have everybody on the team swimming in the same direction and pulling in the same direction, or things don't flow as smoothly. And in general, there's going to be a higher chance of having not a good result. So really the sales that heal terms really go to the fact that this is important, and you have a job as a medical device rep that creates healing, right? Not just quotas, right? Now, and I think everybody in life, I mean, we all need money to live, and it's nice, certainly it's nice to have financial security and things like that. But ultimately, I think we don't exist well in whatever job we're in unless we have fulfillment. And I think the message I wanted to get across with this was, if you take this approach, if you take some of this information that I have and we've put into this masterclass, and you try to apply it to your role as a medical device rep, I think that you will get more fulfillment out of your position and your career. And ultimately, I think that's what helps people be excellent.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to be excellent in a job that you don't like, or an occupation you don't like. It's great to be excellent. It's easier to be excellent when you have passion about something. And I think that, everybody in the healthcare industry has some underlying desire to help people.
Right.
I think that's why we got into the healthcare industry, whether it be on the medical device sales side, the nursing side, hospital administrator side, and we all have different roles in that. And so understanding that, the job that you have and the job that you're carrying out is super critical to what we do every day. And despite the fact that there's, this tsunami sometimes of people kind of saying that we don't need them, or they're not any good, or, is that you play a vital role and you help with the healing of the patient. And I think in understanding that is critical toward you being, able to progress and really provide a foundation for professional excellence as time goes on.
Yeah, you're right. This is a profession. There's not a license that perhaps it comes with it, like a physician's license or a nurse's license. But you're absolutely right. Medical sales reps, medical device reps especially, make a meaningful impact into the day-to-day work in the operating room, and ensuring that things go smoothly. And you're right, you're not going to be appreciated every day, but you are making a big impact in the lives of patients. So medical sales is not for the faint of heart. I will tell you that, based on my 25 years of experience. But those who do it well just absolutely love it because of everything you just said, which is there's a lot of satisfaction that comes with being engaged in a team environment like the operating room, and being involved with helping people heal. So we did have one quick question from a listener. I'm currently a clinic services representative for a respiratory company. What would you recommend my next step to get into device sales with a major company? I'm a registered nurse that has 5 years of experience in the hospital. Well, I was a physical therapist for 10 years. And so I made the jump into medical device and have loved it and haven't looked back. I love the fact that you're a clinician, because you have that mindset, right? That's not something that will ever have to be taught because you've lived it for the last 5 years. But what advice would you have, Pete, for this young person?
Yeah, I think, number one, I would get to know your local reps that are in medical device sales, right? And just, if nothing else, again, just introduce yourself and make it known that, hey, I'm interested in possibly expanding into a different realm. And, because there is some turnover that occurs, certainly for, whether because of success or failure, or in many cases, people move for different purposes. Their spouse
Right.
has a new job somewhere. They have parents that they're going to live closer to, whatever the case might be. They have those things that come up. And so, number one, introducing yourself, finding out, just letting them know you're interested. Number two, look at the companies, talk to the companies, look at what their mission statement is, talk to the reps and find out where do I think I would fit in best. I realize sort of getting in the door is important, but at the same time, nobody wants to get in the door and then leave 6 months later because the mentality or that company's
culture
is not what your culture is.
Right.
So I think understanding what is the culture, so that if an opportunity comes up, maybe if it's with a company that the culture doesn't fit, maybe that's not the right, just like a marriage, maybe that's not the right company. Don't just necessarily jump at it, right? You can certainly refine. And then I think, 3 would be being successful in your current job, right? Yep. There's nothing that begets success like success. So being able to show, so that when a job opening comes up, being able to show that, hey, I've been able to be successful in my current environment. These are the techniques I use. These are the, when people ask, well, how were you successful? What did you do? These are the things that I did to be successful. In general, doesn't always occur, but in general, usually people who are successful can be successful at whatever they, choose to be successful at. But I think those would be the main things. And, there are certainly, keep your ear to the ground. You'll have to define for yourself whether location is important. I'm sure there are tons of places you could find positions in a more major medical device rep environment, but it may require you to move. Is that important? Is it not important? Are you where you need to be at this point in time in life? And that's okay too. And so just, understanding what your goals and or limitations are, and then, trying to find that fit. Yeah.
That's great advice. Here's one other question. This is an interesting one too. What's something a rep has done, unscripted or unexpected, that made a lasting impression on you, and why did it stand out? That comes from Logan Job.
Sure. Yeah, great question. So I will tell you, going back to my original rep, and I'll call him out by name, Mike Brown, who's in Greenville, South Carolina. So, Mike was the first rep that I really had that was, focused and understood the concept. And he had never had a rep job before, and he just got it. He just understood. You got to understand the customer. But I think the most impressive thing that I always saw Mike do was just solve a problem. And when I mean that is, if it involves somebody else's company stuff, whatever it took, like if we were in a case and I needed a different company's product for a certain application, he did not hesitate. He didn't go, oh, well, you sure you can't use my thing? There was nothing like, he was just like, if that's what he was like, great. He was like, and he would contact the rep for the other company. If they weren't there, he would say, hey, where can I find X, this kit? Dr. Mangone needs this. I'll let you know what the part numbers are. I'll get it all, and I'll get it back to you so you can get your sale credit or whatever. And he would just solve the problem, right? Whatever it was at that point in time, he would solve the problem. And so he gained significant trust with me, because I always knew when I was in the OR with Mike that I didn't have anything to worry about. Right. And he would even like sometimes before, if he knew, I had done this case 3 times in the last 6 months and I had used, some other company's implant for a certain portion of the case, he'd be like, hey, do you want to make sure that Joe's there from company Y? Because I know that the last 3 times you've used their product, you want me to make sure that product's there for you, or this. I mean, he would go above and beyond. He was concerned about having the patient have the best outcome in my hands.
Yes.
And ultimately that leads to more trust, which leads to, of course he had good products too. I'm not going to use terrible products just because he's a nice person. But at the same time, that's probably the number one thing in my realm that was, at the time, it was unexpected, right? This was early in my practice. I would have never thought that that would happen, but it was just something that was done that he did without asking, solve the problem. And it goes a long way toward building that trust that you need in that relationship.
Yeah, 100%.
Count on him. Yeah.
Well, and yeah, it sounds like what he decided to do was to put the customer first, which means by proxy, put the patient first.
Right.
To his own potential financial detriment. But in the long term, it paid off in spades, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So that was a great example. Great story. Okay, great. Well, so if you're listening or watching this video now, Lobby members, you get a 20% discount off sales at Heal. You can see the QR code in the right-hand corner. You can go to conveymed.io and get the link there, or you can see the link here, sales at Heal /supercast.com. And you can acquire the audio series and you can download it and listen to it on Apple Podcasts. So it's super easy to just add it to your podcast library and listen to it while you're out running around, calling on customers, and hopefully putting to practice some of the applications and principles that Dr. Mangone and I have put into sales at Heal. So with that, I think we'll call it a night. We look forward to seeing everybody next month. We're going to do part 2 of this series. We're going to get into the sales process. Now that we've kind of laid the foundation of how important it is to prepare and get to know your customer, in the next webinar, we're going to talk through end-to-end the sales process. So we hope and look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.